Most people say moving into a new house is supposed to feel exciting, a fresh start, a clean slate. But the night I moved into mine, something felt off before I even stepped through the front door. And by the time I figured out why, it was almost too late. I'd been searching for a place for 6 months. Rentals in my area were brutal, overpriced, falling apart, or snatched up before I even got a chance to respond. So when I found a 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, listed at a price that actually made sense, I jumped on it. The landlord, a guy named Gerald Futch, answered my email within the hour. We set up a walkthrough for the following Saturday. The house was older, built in the 70s, Gerald told me. It had wood paneling in the hallways, a kitchen that smelled faintly of cedar, and a basement that had been converted into a laundry room. Nothing glamorous but solid, clean, the kind of place you could actually settle into. I signed the lease 2 days later. Moving day was a Wednesday in late October. My buddy Dave helped me haul boxes in his pickup. By the time we finished, it was close to 9 at night, dark outside, temperature dropping. Dave offered to stay, maybe help me set up the TV. I told him I was fine. I just wanted to shower and sleep. That was my first mistake. The shower in the master bathroom was one of those old-style setups, a single frosted glass door, a chrome knob that ran either scalding or freezing, nothing in between. I got the temperature somewhat reasonable, stepped in, and just stood there letting the water hit me. I was exhausted. My legs ached. My back was done. I was in there maybe 10 minutes when I heard it, a door, somewhere inside the house. Not a creak from the walls settling, not the wind catching something loose. An actual door, the soft but deliberate sound of one swinging open and then being eased shut. I stood completely still under the water. My mind went straight to Dave. Maybe he came back. Maybe he forgot something in the truck and I'd left the front door unlocked. I told myself that's what it was. I turned the shower off, grabbed my towel, and listened. Silence. I opened the bathroom door slowly and looked out into the hallway. Dark, empty. The only light was the one I'd left on in the kitchen at the far end of the house. I called Dave's name. Nothing. I checked my phone, no missed calls, no texts. I pulled up his contact and called him. He picked up on the second ring, background noise of a TV behind him, clearly home. I didn't tell him why I was calling. I just said I was checking in. He told me to get some sleep. I walked through every room, checked every closet, checked the back door, locked. Front door still locked, deadbolt in place. Windows all shut, nothing out of place. No signs of anything. I convinced myself it was the house adjusting. Old houses do that. I'd read that somewhere. I woke up at 2:53 in the morning. I know the exact time because I looked at my phone the second my eyes opened. There was no gradual waking up, no slow drift into consciousness. 1 second I was asleep, and the next I was wide awake, sitting upright, heart hammering. There was a light on in the hallway. I hadn't left that light on. I was certain of it. I'd turned off every light in the house except the one in my bedroom, and I'd fallen asleep with that one on because I didn't know where the lamp was yet. The hallway light was off when I went to sleep. Now it was on. I sat there in the dark for what felt like 5 full minutes, just staring at the sliver of yellow light coming through the gap under my bedroom door. I kept waiting for some logical explanation to surface in my brain. It didn't. I got up, I opened the door. The hallway was empty, but at the far end of it, the door to the third bedroom, the one I was using for storage, was open about 4 inches. I had closed that door. I specifically remembered closing it because I'd stacked boxes against the wall in there and didn't want them in my line of sight every time I walked past. I pushed the door fully open and hit the light switch. A man was standing behind a stack of boxes in the corner of the room. He wasn't hiding exactly. He was just standing there. A white guy, maybe mid-40s, heavy build, wearing a gray sweatshirt and dark jeans. He had a duffel bag on the floor next to him. He blinked when the light came on like he hadn't expected it either. We stared at each other. My brain emptied out completely. Not a single thought, just raw, electric fear. He moved first. He grabbed the duffel bag and took a step toward me, and that one motion snapped me back into my body. I turned and ran. I didn't think about it. I didn't plan it. I just ran, straight down the hallway into my room, slammed and locked the door. I grabbed my phone and called 911, and I stood with my back against the wall next to the window, completely shaking, whispering to the dispatcher because I was afraid of how far my voice would carry. She told me to stay on the line. She told me units were on the way. I heard him in the hallway, footsteps, calm ones, not rushing. Then I heard the front door open. Then nothing. The police arrived 4 minutes later. They found the man 2 streets over, sitting on a curb with the duffel bag between his feet. Inside the bag were a sleeping bag, canned food, a water bottle, a flashlight, and a change of clothes. He knew the previous tenant, had been staying in that room on and off for weeks, long before I moved in. He had a key, copied from one the previous tenant had given him, and he'd been letting himself in through the back while the house sat empty during the gap between leases. He hadn't expected anyone to move in that Wednesday. Gerald had told him the lease started November 1st. There was a miscommunication on the dates, and somehow, this man had gotten caught in the middle of it. The detective told me that like it was supposed to make me feel better. It didn't. Because what I kept thinking about, what I still think about now, is the fact that I almost didn't wake up. That if I'd been a heavier sleeper, he might have let himself out quietly before sunrise, and I never would have known. I would have just kept living there, completely unaware, while someone with a key came and went whenever they felt like it. That house never felt like home after that night. I broke the lease 6 weeks later. Gerald kept the deposit. I didn't fight it. Most people check the locks before they go to sleep at night. I used to think that was enough. I don't anymore. We moved into the house on a Thursday. My wife, Sarah, and our 7-year-old daughter, Mia. It was one of those older 2-story homes in a quiet neighborhood outside of Columbus, Ohio. Wide front porch, big backyard, hardwood floors that creaked just enough to feel charming. We'd been renting apartments for years. This was supposed to be our fresh start, our first real home. The first 2 nights were completely normal. Boxes everywhere, takeout containers on the counter, Mia running through the empty hallways like she owned the place. Sarah kept talking about paint colors and curtain ideas. I remember thinking, finally, things are going right. The third night I couldn't sleep, not because anything dramatic happened. No loud noise, no obvious sign. I just woke up at around 3 a.m. with this uncomfortable feeling that I'd left something unfinished. The way you feel when you can't remember if you turned off the stove. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling for about 10 minutes before I gave up and went downstairs to get some water. The kitchen light was on. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I was certain, completely certain, that I had turned that light off before bed. Sarah had already been upstairs when I did my last walkthrough. Mia was in her room. I stood there for a moment, then told myself I'd just forgotten. New house, new routine. I turned the light off and went back to bed. I didn't think about it again until Saturday. Sarah was at the grocery store. Mia was in the backyard playing. I was in the living room putting together a bookshelf when Mia came running inside with that look on her face. Excited. A little uncertain, the way kids look when they're not sure if they're in trouble. She asked me who the man in the basement was. I put down the screwdriver slowly. I asked her what she was talking about. She said she'd seen a man through the basement window when she was playing near the side of the house. She said he was just standing there looking up at her. I told her it was probably a reflection. I told her to go wash her hands for lunch. And then I stood up, walked to the basement door, and stood in front of it for probably 30 seconds before I opened it. I went down every step slowly, keeping the lights on as I went. It was mostly empty down there, just the water heater, some old shelving the previous owners had left behind, and boxes we hadn't unpacked yet. I walked the entire perimeter, checked the small window wells on the outside-facing wall. Nothing. No sign of anything, but there were two folding chairs set up in the far corner of the basement, face to face, like someone had been sitting there having a conversation. We hadn't put those chairs there. We didn't even own folding chairs. They must have come with the house, left behind like the shelving. That's what I told myself. I folded them up, leaned them against the wall, and went back upstairs. I didn't tell Sarah about the chairs. I didn't want to scare her over what was probably nothing. I convinced myself that's all it was. Nothing. That night I did something I hadn't done since we moved in. I checked every door and every window before bed. Everything was locked. 4 days later, I found a plate of food in the basement. A real plate, ceramic, not paper, with a fork resting on it and the remnants of what looked like rice and some kind of meat, partially eaten. Not rotten, not old. It looked like it had been left there within the last day or two. I called Sarah down immediately. She went pale. We stood there together in that basement just staring at this plate like it was something out of a nightmare. Because the implication of what it meant, that was the part neither of us wanted to say out loud. Someone was eating down there. I called the police that afternoon. 2 officers came, walked the basement, found nothing else. No signs of forced entry, no explanation for the plate. They took a report and suggested the previous owners might have accidentally left it. One of them said it with a straight face. I didn't know what to say to that. That night, Sarah took Mia to her mother's house. I told her I'd stay and figure it out. What I didn't tell her was that I'd found a latch behind the old shelving unit. A small, recessed latch on what I'd thought was just a section of drywall. When I pulled the shelf away from the wall and opened it, there was a narrow crawl space back there. Maybe 4 feet wide, 6 feet deep. Enough room for someone to stand, or sit, or sleep. There was a sleeping bag rolled up in the corner, a water bottle, a small battery-powered lantern, and a plastic bag with a change of clothes. Someone had been living in my house, not breaking in at night, living there, using my basement as a home, while we slept upstairs, while my daughter played in the backyard, while Sarah and I sat in the living room talking about curtain colors. I didn't go in. I backed away, went upstairs, and called the police again. This time they came with more people. They searched the entire property. They found no one inside, but the back fence panel, the one that looked fixed, had actually been cut away from the post and reattached with wire so it could swing open from the outside like a gate. Whoever it was had their own way in and out. They never found who it was. We installed cameras the next week, changed every lock, added bolts, sealed the crawl space permanently. We still live in that house. Mia still plays in the backyard. But I check that basement every single night before I go to bed. Every corner, every shadow, behind every shelf. And I haven't slept a full night since. Because here's the thing no one tells you about moving into a new place. You do all the walkthroughs, you sign all the paperwork, you turn the key in the lock and think it's yours now. But you never really know who was there before you, or whether they ever left. I moved into the house on a Tuesday. By Friday, I wished I never had. If you've ever bought a house that felt like a deal too good to pass up, you need to hear this. Because I learned the hard way that some prices aren't listed on paper. It was a 3-bedroom colonial in rural Ohio, priced at $62,000. Cash sale. Previous owner had passed away, no surviving family, and the county just wanted it off the books. My realtor said it was a rare find. I said it was a miracle. I signed the papers the same day I walked through it. The house was dated but solid. Wood floors, original fixtures, a big kitchen with windows that looked out over a field that stretched maybe a quarter-mile before hitting the tree line. I remember standing at that kitchen window the first morning, drinking coffee, thinking, yeah, this is it. This is the life I worked for. The first thing I noticed was the basement door. Not because of what it looked like, it was just a plain white door at the end of the hallway. But it had 3 separate deadbolts on the outside. 3 heavy-duty ones. The kind you'd put on an exterior door facing the street, not on an interior door going down to your own basement. I figured the previous owner was eccentric. Old people get paranoid. I didn't think much of it. I unlocked all three and went down. It was a normal basement. Concrete floor, exposed pipes, a water heater, a furnace. A few old cardboard boxes stacked along one wall. Nothing unusual. I went back upstairs and forgot about it. The second thing I noticed was the neighbor. His name was Walter. He was in his 70s, lived in the farmhouse about 400 yards to the east. He came over the second day with a loaf of banana bread and a look on his face I didn't quite know how to read. He handed me the bread, looked at the house behind me and said, "You're not planning to stay long, are you?" I laughed. I thought he was joking. He wasn't smiling. I asked him what he meant. He said the last man who lived here, a guy named Dale, had been found dead in the basement about 8 months ago. I already knew that, I told him. Natural causes, the county had said. Walter nodded slowly and said, "Is that what they told you?" He left before I could ask him anything else. That night, I went back down to the basement with a flashlight and actually looked around. I went through the cardboard boxes. Most of it was junk, old magazines, broken tools, a rusted coffee can full of screws. But in the last box near the bottom I found a notebook. Composition notebook. Black cover. Dale's name written on the inside front page in shaky handwriting. I sat on the floor of that basement and I read it. The first dozen pages were mundane. Shopping lists, phone numbers, reminders. But around page 20 the tone changed. Dale had started writing about sounds. Not inside the house, outside it. Movement in the field at night. He'd written about seeing flashlight beams from his bedroom window at 2, 3 in the morning, moving through the tree line. He wrote that he'd called the sheriff twice and been told it was probably hunters, even though hunting season was months out. Then he wrote about the morning he found his storm door unlatched. He was certain he'd locked it. He wrote it down 3 times on the same page, like he was trying to convince himself. He started leaving the lights on at night. He installed a camera on the front porch. He wrote that the camera had been moved, physically turned to face the wall twice. Not broken, not stolen, just turned around. The entries got shorter after that, more fragmented. One of the last ones just said, "They know I know." I closed the notebook. I sat there for a long minute in the quiet of that basement. Then I stood up, went upstairs, locked the basement door, all 3 bolts, and called Walter. He picked up on the second ring like he'd been waiting. I asked him what really happened to Dale. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said Dale had been trying to document what was happening on his property for months. People cutting through the field at night. He thought it was connected to something bigger, something organized. He'd sent letters to the county sheriff, to a state representative's office. Walter said he didn't know if anyone had ever read them. I asked Walter if anything had happened since Dale died. He said, "Not until you moved in." I slept with every light in the house on that night. I pushed my dresser in front of the bedroom door. I don't know exactly when I fell asleep, but I know what woke me up. The back door was open, not unlocked, open, wide open. I sat up in bed and I didn't move for a full minute, just listening, just thinking. I grabbed my phone and my keys. That's all I took. I pushed the dresser aside, walked down the hall, stepped through that open back door without touching it, and I walked to my truck in the driveway. I drove to a motel 20 minutes away. In the morning, I called a locksmith, a realtor, and then the county sheriff's office. I told the sheriff about the notebook, about Walter, about the door. The deputy I spoke to was professional. He listened. He took notes. But when I described the notebook and Dale's entries, he paused for just a moment, just a beat too long, and said, "That property has had a complicated history." I asked what that meant. He said he couldn't comment on an active investigation. Active investigation. 8 months after Dale was found dead in that basement. Active. I sold the house 6 weeks later. Took a loss. Didn't care. Walter called me the day after closing. He said he was glad I was gone. Not unkindly, He said it like someone relieved that a kid had finally stepped back from the edge of something they couldn't see. He said Dale had been a stubborn man. Said Dale thought documentation was protection. It isn't. I don't know what was happening on that property. I don't know who was moving through that field at night, or why they turned the camera around instead of stealing it, or why 3 heavy deadbolts were installed on the outside of a basement door. I don't know what Dale knew or what it cost him. What I know is this: sometimes a deal that looks too good has already been paid for by someone else, and sometimes the price wasn't money. If you made it to the end of this video, hit that subscribe button right now, drop a comment below and tell me, could you have stayed in these houses? And if this video got under your skin, leave a like. I'll see you in the next one.